good evening, and good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen. You know what this is, WeatherBrains, episode number 791 for the 15th of March, 2021. Oh, boy, we got some weather to deal with this week. Goodness gracious. But let's take care of business. We're going to get the embed code rocking and rolling here, and then we're going to bring on our guests. Might have a major severe weather situation down here in the Deep South Wednesday, and that'll obviously is what's the big story in the weather office here. We've talked about this on the show before. You know, what's funny, you know, for years and years, you kind of rested up, and when that big day came, you were ready to go, full energy. But in the last 15 years with the social media age, you are so busy with stuff to do leading up to the event that by the time the event starts, you are just drop dead exhausted. And that's not good. So, but I'm in that magical phase where I'm approaching drop dead exhausted. But that will make this a good show, because the best shows we've ever done are when I am drop dead exhausted. So let's invite everybody and get this party started. This ought to be a good show tonight. But yeah, we'll talk about the severe weather risk on Wednesday for the Deep South. A lot of, weather Twitter is on fire tonight. All right, let's see here. Maybe Troy's going to join us. You know, Troy has been away for several weeks recovering from major damage he had to his place in Austin after the winter storm and, water problems and all this. So hopefully he will be back on the show tonight. In fact, we ought to just give him the whole show to talk about his experience. Goodness gracious. It's been a rough ride for him, for sure, but I think he's back in service and everything seems to be back in, he's back in business. So that's good. And I think just maybe everybody's going to be here tonight. First time we've had the whole gang together in a while. So, yeah. But obviously I might be a little distracted tonight as the cams begin to roll in. Convection allowing models, the OZ batch. Of course, we're back on, daylight saving time now. So all the model data is an hour later in the real world. So that's just the way it goes, but we can live with that. But the daylight I'm a standard time guy. I know most of the world is a daylight saving time group, but I'm a standard time guy because I get up every morning, at like 4:30. And so when my alarm went off today, my body knew it was really 3:30. You can't fool this old body. It's been around for a long time.
You can't fool Mother Nature.
It knows things. Ooh, Bill's got some new artwork.
Well, it's the game of guess where I am tonight.
Oh, on the road.
On the road again.
So, Jen, I'm trying to figure out what that thing is above Bill's heads up there. Do you have any idea what that is?
I haven't even looked at it. That's kind of scary.
It looks like a spider. To me,
looks demonic to me.
It does. Oh. That's a demonic spider. What are you doing in that room? That's weird.
I'm in room 666. Is that a problem?
That was my next guess. Bill is in room 666. And ladies and gentlemen, Troy is back after his long
it's
ordeal.
So good to see you.
Troy's probably got some new artwork too.
Yeah, he's got some artwork. Now his is a little more uplifting than yours.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, there's a word search thing in the bathroom that really scares me.
Show title. Of course, we can't use a show title before the show starts, but that would be a good one. There's a word search thing in the bathroom.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's got a word on it that I've never heard before, and I don't know. I haven't looked it up yet to see what it means.
Oh boy.
Just don't look in Urban Dictionary.
Yeah, it might be. It might have come from there.
Hi,
so
Troy.
Troy, I don't think he can hear us. Hello.
Oh no.
Yeah, Earth to Troy. Earth to Troy. No audio here. Stand by.
Heavens to Murgatroyd.
So I've been writing so much on Facebag. I wrote a post and I didn't even think about it. I used the word jabroni. That's all
Did you get
these, you
banned?
know, all of these upper echelon people, you know, with their nose kind of up in the air. What is this? That's not in
They
the
never listen
English
to
language.
WeatherBrains, huh?
Of course, half the crowd said, "Man, you're awesome, man. Anybody that uses jabroni in a Facebook post, I'm going to follow them. That's awesome."
And then you got banned for hate speech.
Yeah. You know, they did shut me down for a post on seasonal outlooks. They didn't ban it, but nobody could share it. If people tried to share it, they said it was, I guess it was, you know, fake news or whatever.
Fake news.
Went against their community standards. All the post was simply, and, you know, my position on seasonal outlooks, I mean, what do you do with them? And a lot of the, you know, stuff people are reading, it was scaring them half to death. You know, this will be worse than 2011, another April 27th super outbreak, mega storms. I mean, some of these people are horrified. And I just came in to simply say, look, guys, calm down. You know, we're going to have severe storms every spring. It's okay. And then I just kind of went through some stuff and nobody could share it because apparently I criticized, I think one of the articles was from CNN. And I had somebody tell me they did that once where they were critical of that outlet and they got shut down. So I don't know if it's a CNN Facebook alliance. I don't know anything about this stuff. It is the most bizarre situation dealing with platforms we don't control. I need Kevin Selly on the show to go on one of his rants. Tim Marshall is here.
Howdy from Texas.
Man, he's kind of a big deal.
You've been on that same beach before, James. Are you and Tim?
Yeah. We share. We're next door neighbors in Aruba. Hey, Troy, can you hear us? Okay.
Yeah, I can hear y'all. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes. Oh, it's so good to see you.
Well,
all right. Well, let's get this.
It's good to be back. And
all right. Hang on. Let's get this thing started for you. Wait, hang on. I don't want to miss the good stuff here. I sense the good stuff is about to start. So, and we do play the intro. So let's get this thing started. Here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
WeatherBrains is brought to you by Midland Weather Radio. Every home, school, and business should have a NOAA Weather Radio, the official voice of the National Weather Service. And the AMS Weather Band.
Join the American Meteorological Society by becoming a member of the band. The AMS Weather Band is a global community of weather enthusiasts dedicated to learning and sharing their love of science. Visit amsweatherband.org to learn more and join the band today.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is WeatherBrains, episode number 791. The weekly show that's all about weather. This is for the 15th of March, 2021. Beware the Ides of March. Beware the Ides of March. But let's just say we are so glad. Look who's back on the show this week. Troy Kimmel, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it. As Tim knows and other people know, it has not been any fun in Texas. And everyone that through the years have kind of gotten used to the old home office, that will not be around much longer. Basically, I'm out of the house. The house sustained pretty severe flood damage the night of the 17th of February. It was the night, by the way, previous night, that my famous MMTS that I always talk about, James, got to 3.8 degrees in Austin. Actually got to 3.8 in Northwest Austin. And unfortunately, I'd been moved out of the place because I was without power for a long time, and the university moved me to a more secure location. So I continued to work for them. And I watched on the security system on that Wednesday night after power returned and watched the water pipes go in the roof on the security system. So luckily there were people around that cut the water off with 5 inches of snow. I don't know how they did it because Troy wouldn't have been able to do it, but they were able to cough the water pretty quickly. But the damage had been done pretty much, and I'm being displaced for a couple of months. until we can rebuild the place again, basically, and just kind of going from there. But I appreciate everyone's feedback and everybody here on the Brains, and just appreciate everybody's support. I'm going to be with you the first hour tonight. Got to pull out after that for a little bit, but I'm glad to be back with you.
Good to have you back.
We missed you. Water damage is the worst. It's just horrible. There's nothing
I
good
would
about
take,
it.
and I'm hoping Tim doesn't hop on me for this, but I would take almost the EF4 or 5. At least I know what it's going to do. And you're right, James. I have never seen water do what it did in that house. And the bad thing is, and Tim will tell you this, and people from Texas, is you can't, tonight, it's a month after the fact, my furniture is still in the house because you can't hire a mover and you can't get anyone to assess the damage. In Texas, it is impossible. Today, I will tell you, we finally got the people that are going to move me out. They're going to start that on Thursday. So I'm real happy about that. But then they begin the demolition after that. So, but really amazing. I mean, I would have always, Tim, I would have thought about the tornadoes and the straight line winds and other things that happened at the house. I just didn't expect a 3.8 degree temperature to come with this. So.
Well, a lot of Texans didn't either. And I experienced rolling blackouts that kept my house just above the mark of freezing. So I was one of the lucky ones. But some of the people that I know just were without power and their house froze up and flooded their house when it started warming up. Yeah, it's terrible.
And you know,
I don't think people understand, Troy and Tim, the magnitude of the humanitarian crisis in Texas.
Well, they finally said, Tim, today, and I'll tell you, I think this number is way low. I don't think frankly, I don't know that the government's ready to admit it just yet, but they're saying 57 weather deaths in Texas because of the cold. And I'm telling you, that's going to be very, very low. That's too low. It's going a lot higher than that. We'll find out. They say even 50 people died in Harris County in Houston, but one report said today that 57 statewide. So it's going to be interesting to see where that goes. And by the way, Tim, this is what surprised me from an engineering standpoint, which is your expertise. I had 3/4 inch copper insulated. That's the Texas code. I mean, in any year, that would have been great. I have PEX pipe now. I got all PEX. If you've ever heard of PEX, it is I don't know, it's sort of a plastic pipe, and they've installed it all in my ceiling now. They did it in the last week, and it apparently can expand and contract and will not break. So
goodness gracious. Well,
so I've got I got the pipe now. It'll never get to 3.8 again in my life, but I got really damn fine pipe. So
show title.
Yeah.
So let's go up Interstate 35 to Oklahoma, and Kim, you kind of watched it from a distance there, but you missed all you had the snow and the cold, but not the problems that Texas had.
Yep. And Troy knows what I'm going to say here. I mean, it's been a really interesting case study for our community in the unevenness of impacts, and that there are just some things that we have no control over, different systems that actually determine the impacts. And the more that we try to quantify it, the more elusive I think it becomes. But yeah, in Oklahoma, we're attached to the Southwest Power Pool, and they were actually adding power generation capacity up in Montana to send down southward, including our way. So we were covered.
So Kim, so you're saying the Texas Unreliability Energy Council didn't work so well?
Oh, poor ERCOT. I don't know who to feel worse for. I feel pretty awful for those people because ERCOT itself, my impression is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, you live there, but my impression is that they run a system that has been governed, and that it's the government that essentially set up this system and made choices. And it'll be really interesting to see what happens now and what the decision making looks like going forward.
Yeah, a lot of the board members from ERCOT have stepped down. I know Tim knows this as well, that been a lot of people stepped down, and even the head of the Public Utility Commission in Texas has stepped down now.
Correct.
So,
Wow.
But one thing that was interesting, I don't know if y'all heard this, but last year there were supposed to be winterization in-person checks of a lot of these plants in Texas, but because of COVID, They did none of them last year.
Mm.
Yeah, that was the big deal. So.
Goodness gracious. Well, let's see. Jen, you've been on tornado duty today,
Yeah.
right? Doing a little radio weather for the tornado activity in Kansas City.
Kansas City on 980 KMBZ. I was on for about 2 hours today. We did have at least one tornado brief touchdown in Johnson County, Kansas, near the Stillwell area. And last I had read, there was about 20 homes that had some damage, or a lot of trees and power lines down as well. And Bruce, you bet you're watching this. How close is that to you? He's got to push the buttons.
Hello. Yeah, you're muted, Bruce.
So yeah, it was down near Southside Kansas City. Yeah.
Okay.
So, we just watched it here, and they were right along the boundary, and 2 supercells at least in that area. So it was a little hectic. I haven't done that in about a year, gone live that log, because it was so quiet in Kansas and Missouri last year. So that was the first I've done in a while. So got the rest off, and now I'm ready for the season.
Yeah, my 14-year-old and I were taking shelter in this office here in my basement. It was about touchdown was about 4 or 5 miles down to my southwest, right down over there. Just F0, it looks like.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. So Aubrey, welcome back. How are you?
Fantastic. Glad to be back.
It's like, what's happening with you? Haven't seen you in a while. How's life?
Oh, life is fantastic. Trying to get some of the spring weather in here, the wintry weather out of here. And just working on a lot of endless projects, it seems like. But I'm very happy to be back tonight. And it looks like we've got a really good show. So very excited. And of course, happy to see Troy back. We're so excited, Troy.
I appreciate it, Aubrey. Thank you.
Indeed. Nate Johnson, the head of the AMS, NWA, the Southeastern Conference, NCAA, World Wrestling Federation. This man is in charge of everything.
And look at that NBC pillow behind him.
That's right. That's right. That I had to pay for, by the way. There are no comps here. That's all. I got a discount, but no comps. Good to be here. Really glad to see Troy back. My in-laws up in Abilene never lost power through all of this, and my father-in-law feels like terribly guilty that he was there in the middle of this, and they have LP gas for heat, and they had a couple of generators. I mean, they were sort of stocked up and sort of ready to lose power, sort of expecting to, and never did. And then he turns on the news every night and sees the humanitarian suffering that's happening. It's interesting, Troy, you brought up the report that the state released today that there are 57 deaths. I noted 25 in Harris County, which is where Houston is. The next largest death toll is in Taylor County, which is where Abilene is. So 6 hours to the northwest, which surprised me a little bit. I'm not sure what I expected, but I didn't expect to see them that high on that list. But still, a lot of cleanup work to do. And Troy, that I think you were here with us when I had the water pipe bust in my house a few years ago. That was clean water, and it gets everywhere. It's a nightmare, and I can't imagine having to deal with that while everybody else is having to deal with it too. It's just impossible.
True.
All right. Well, Bill Murray, let's bring our guest in here. This is going to be a good show. We've got some legends on the show tonight.
Yeah, the show's going to be almost over before we finish all the introductions tonight, James.
By the way, Bill, whose hotel Wi-Fi are you stealing tonight?
No, well, I actually pay. Well, I'm a dime. What's the highest Marriott thing? I have that, so you get it for free. You get it's really working well. So
you're not stealing anybody's Wi-Fi.
No, I didn't even have to pay for it. You got a free bottle of water to boot.
There you go.
Yeah, with 2 hoteliers on the show tonight, and Nate using the word comps. This panel has got a bunch of hotel terminology to it. So Lisa, I usually let all the other panelists guess which brand I'm in. It's a brand I've never stayed in before. I chose it particularly because of that. So, but anyway, they've been talking about my artwork. It's kind of disturbing.
Yes.
So I'm not quite sure what that is. It's a protozoa or something. But we have a really special guest tonight, Ms. Lisa Stone. She's the general manager of that Hampton Inn in Fultondale that was struck by the tornado on my birthday, January 25th. Her hotel was not only heavily damaged, it was destroyed by the CF3 tornado. Lisa, as Lisa can tell us, they tore it down this weekend, Lisa. That surprised Tim Marshall.
Yes, it's gone.
So they plans to rebuild it, I assume.
Yes, we'll be back summer of 2022.
Well, that's awesome. Well, we're really thrilled and honored to have you here tonight to get your perspective as a hotel general manager who was in the middle of this thing. We got a lot of the stuff, so please bear with us as we go through that. But we're going to come back to you after Jason spends some time. We're anxious to hear your story. We have Jason.
Hey, Bill. Hey, Bill.
Yes,
before we get past Lisa here, real quick, we had a camera on top of her building. I don't know where that thing is.
Oh no!
It's like we one of our sky cams was on top of that building, so it's somewhere between East Aboga and Andalusia right now. So,
Lisa, see if you can find that for us, okay? Yeah, James would appreciate that.
The key word in that sentence, by the way, is had.
Well, now we have to put GPS tracking devices in all the cameras.
Yeah,
exactly. So we lost the one in Gulf Shores to Hurricane Sally, and we lost the one in Fultondale to the tornado. So I'm afraid to see what happens this week. But anyway,
I need a whole list of your camera locations, James, so I can stay away from them. So, but we are excited to have you, Lisa. Next, we have Jason Davis. He's a general forecaster at the National Weather Service in Birmingham. He pulled the trigger on that outstanding warning that saved lives that night. Jason's going to spend some time in a few minutes, tell us about the meteorological factors and radar data and the background behind that tornado and that warning. Jason, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're really excited. So we're looking forward to that because the information Birmingham has put out about that tornado is really fascinating. Our viewers are going to really enjoy, and our listeners are going to enjoy hearing about that background. But thank you for being here tonight. And I don't think Kevin joined us, did he? Is Kevin on here? I've got so many windows of people now. I can't see everybody on one window. But
I have
Kevin,
not seen Dr. Laws yet.
Okay, good. Well, that warning reached a lot of people that night because of NOAA Weather Radio, and we're proud to have Midland as one of our sponsors of the show. Mr. Bruce Jones is the biggest ambassador of NOAA Weather Radio and Midland. And Bruce, welcome to the show early tonight.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And, I've always admonished everyone to make sure they have multiple and redundant ways of getting these warnings, and that Fultondale tornado was a good example of that.
Well, and Bruce is bringing prizes tonight for Lisa, so we're excited about that. I guess I covered everybody. Did I miss? Oh, Mr. Tim Marshall. How could I forget Tim? He was the basis of the show when we started.
He's kind of a big deal.
I said to Lisa tonight that he was a tornado engineer, and Tim quickly said, "I don't make tornadoes," and I had to quickly clarify that he's not making them in his basement. But of course, he's one of the world's leading experts on tornadoes from an engineering standpoint. And I want to dive deeply tonight into some construction and engineering stuff, Tim, to talk about how the leaders of organizations and businesses can better prepare, their organizations for tornado plans. And he's obviously a friend of the podcast, having appeared on several special shows. Tim, welcome back.
Thank you. Glad
Coming
to
to
be
us
back.
from your home in Aruba. That's pretty nice.
Yes. I love this beautiful tropical weather in my study here that I got.
They need to have the tropical weather the conference there. They're going to have it in South Padre again, but it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to have it at your place, it looks like.
Well, you would be surprised at how crowded it is in my man cave here. So that's why the backdrop.
Well, we're really excited to have you here tonight, Tim. Thank you for joining us. Now, Jason, the event was sort of, it overperformed in one way with one storm, but that was pretty much kind of what the forecast was for. But when we started WeatherBrains that night on January 25th, I told James, I said, hey, James, we got some STPs above 2, north and west of Birmingham. And that's when the show got its title that night, which was Bill Needs to Take a Valium Sandwich. And it turned out to be pretty prescient what the models were saying. So talk to us, run through any slides. James, you may have to let him share because I think those slides are really excellent. Talk about how the tornado happened and what was going through your mind and the other forecasters on your team, because I know the warning, you may have pulled the trigger on it, but it was a team effort.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and try to share right here.
And let me see if I can press the right button here and give give that. See,
James is our chief
multiple
button pusher here.
Yeah, chief. See, that's the only reason I'm here is to push these buttons.
Careful, I couldn't even unmute my mic tonight.
Yeah.
We all have
Jason,
button
try
pushing
that.
challenges.
Try that.
And Lisa, you're going to get
Bingo.
a really
We have a winner.
radar meteorology here.
We have a winner. And by the way, Jason, just so you'll know, most people listen to the show. So if you would please kind of describe what you're showing here.
All right. Hope you can see the radar image there.
Perfect. Looks good.
I know leading up to the event, or even a couple of days prior, kind of saw maybe a conditional type environment where we had instability and wind shear, but the forcing was questionable and some evidence of maybe a bit of a cap on some of the soundings. So it wasn't quite certain if we'd see any deep convection that night, but I think as the morning model runs came in and some of the cams, not all the cams were showing some rotating updrafts in the area and some decent Cape values, and SPC upgraded to a slight risk. I know we agreed with that. And then the tornado watch was issued fairly early, a little before 6 p.m. that night. But then for a couple hours, not a whole lot happened. We had some storms develop in northwest Alabama. They weren't really doing too much, but we did see the supercell off towards Jackson, Mississippi, I think around 7 o'clock or so. It had some persistent rotation, some tornado warnings issued. But as far as we know, there was actually no tornadoes with that storm in Mississippi, even though there's a lot of times where it seemed like it was getting close to having a tornado and didn't. But we were, noticing, that we were seeing some cold cloud tops on satellite, a lot of lightning activity with the storm. So we could tell, there was the cap had definitely broken for that day. So we were getting that deep convection. Just overall, even across the state line, we kept watching it, and it's almost like being in a boxing match. There's always head fakes that was thrown at us where you thought it was about to do something and it didn't. And so we had, when there's one storm we're watching, we'll usually have polygon already kind of pre-drawn ahead of time to be ready. I think James was happy that we didn't interrupt the Bachelor that night with any false alarm warnings. So.
Yes, that was an answer to prayer.
Right. Go back a couple slides. There we go. So starting off at 10:04 p.m., about 36 minutes prior to the tornado. Some of the challenges with this storm, I think, the environment was favorable, but there's kind of a question of why it didn't produce anything earlier. And some of the problems may have been it's kind of messy. There's maybe some other storms in its inflow region, kind of disrupting it. It was an area of a little bit weaker shear in Mississippi, but that was kind of gradually increasing into Alabama as the warm front was also lifting off to the north. So for those that can see it, the star is kind of where the storm interest is. You can see it's not this leading storm, it's actually the storm behind it. There's another little kind of shower south of the storm. At this point, we have a little bit of weak convergence showing up in the velocity data. The green's pointing towards the radar, red's away from the radar. The radar's off to the southeast and just south of Birmingham. And now we get even 10:27 p.m., 13 minutes prior to the tornado. Sorry, roof activity by itself is fairly innocuous, just kind of almost a linear feature. Maybe another little shower in the inflow of the storm. We're starting to note in the velocity a little bit of an increased convergence happening at this time. Kind of some stronger winds moving away from the radar and towards the radar into the gust front of the storm. I also noticed a ramp up in lightning activity. And I think one of the key things to this storm is you couldn't just look at what was happening down at the base elevation scan. You kind of had to look aloft in the storm to see what was happening. At that point, about the same time, 13 minutes before the tornado, we do see a little bit better of a structure and activity aloft. This is looking at 2.4 degrees or 7,500 feet up in the storm. A little bit more of a broad kind of mid-level meso happening at this point. But it was happening with convergence below it. So there was potential for some stretching going on there. Then at 10:32 p.m. is when things really start to change. Sort of get more of a hook shape and reflectivity, kind of a counterclockwise pivot here in the rear flank downdraft of the storm, kind of wrapping around. The convergence is beginning to shift towards more of a rotational signature. And obviously at this point, we're really starting to look at a potential tornado warning at that point. Really the smoking gun was probably my final trigger for the tornado. Of course, there was 4 of us all looking at the storm and been looking for a couple hours. But thankfully also at this point, some of the overnight shift had come in and had some fresh eyes to look at the storm as well. Then at 10:33 p.m., 7 minutes prior to the tornado, at the 1.8 degree elevation scan, about 5,500 feet above the ground, notice what we call a B-weir, or bounded weak echo region and reflectivity. And kind of a high reflectivity surrounding a donut hole of low reflectivity. That's just an indicator of a strong updraft in the storm. It's not letting as much rain fall down to the ground. It's kind of suspending the rain drops up in the air. And that point is a very strong couplet showing up aloft. Again, showing the really importance of looking at some of the higher scans. You know, we have sails, a lot of low level scans, and sometimes we don't get as many scans aloft. I know there's upgrades to the radars coming that could hopefully are going to allow for more scans of some of these other lower tilts for the storm. And that's definitely what triggered the warning at that point. And then we skip ahead a little bit now to 10:40 and the tornado forms. Kind of a subtle hook echo and reflectivity. Also kind of noticed we also at this point had a much cleaner inflow into the storm. There wasn't really any other showers or storms coming into it, so plenty of warm, moist air coming in. And at this point, we saw the very tight couplet form, and this is when the tornado is forming right west of Fultondale here. Move along, of course, it moves past the hotel. And then at 10:44 p.m., and we see the tornado at its maximum intensity in some neighborhoods with EF3 type winds. At this point, very strong couplet, tornado debris signature. You know, so once we saw tornado debris, of course, when confirmed, and also added the considerable tag that says, you know, confirmed large and extremely dangerous tornado versus just a radar indicated tornado. If you looked aloft, you see in the correlation coefficient indicates things that are not just rain in the storm. There's pieces of debris, non-similar things, and that actually extends all the way up 15,000 feet in the storm. And that's also a clear indication that you have typically a strong EF2 or greater tornado based on research. So we talk a little bit about what caused the tornado, look at the environment. And like so many events around here, there's always the competing factors where some factors are good, some factors are not so good. This happened in only kind of a marginal to slight risk. I think it was actually in a marginal risk, although it was in a watch at that point. Also a challenge is, you know, it's really the only game in town, the only tornado that happened. You know, this is not a storm that had a history of producing tornadoes. And of course, with the SPC risks, and those are always probabilities and coverage based. And so it kind of fits that isolated type thing. That's why there wasn't a higher risk area. We did have some weather balloon soundings. We launched from our office. We see initially at 6 p.m. The 0Z sounding from Birmingham. We see we had some CAPE, about 400 joules per kilogram of CAPE, and some veering winds. Although you can see kind of a little bit of that capping version showing up above 700 millibars. And so we had some SIN to deal with. And then the next sounding was taken slightly after the tornado had already kind of gone through Fultondale. It was considered a 6Z midnight launch. It was actually probably launched closer to 11 p.m. It still gave a pretty decent idea of what the environment was like. At this point, you see a lot of moistening in the low levels. It's like these lower instability cases, kind of those last few bits of degrees of dew points really helps. There still was the evidence of that cap. And we see if you lift the parcel that it could overcome that cap, although, of course, in the real atmosphere, that parcels don't always follow the exact line. And so the cap is probably why there weren't more storms happening further south of this main line of activity. At this point, though, we had plenty of CAPE. It really wasn't low CAPE at that point, around almost 1,200 joules per kilogram of CAPE. Plenty of felicity. Some of the wind profiles weren't quite as favorable, although it may have been slightly better up in Birmingham with the wind direction. And some of that may have been related to, possible like boundary from previous storms. Let's see. So looking at the storm structure, again, the environment was favorable. The SDP was there, so it wasn't necessarily a surprise that a tornado happened. I think in the back of my mind, I probably knew I couldn't rule out a strong tornado, but it wasn't, as significant. It's just kind of a question of why there weren't more storms, which may have been with the cap or just some of the other evolution stuff. Another thing that was looked at after the fact was some of these little tags and reflectivity, these little kind of little areas that kind of jut out from this area of storms, which may have indicated a gravity wave. And a gravity wave, sounds really complex, but just basically, if you were to like drop a rock into a pond and the rock hits the more dense water, it's going to make all these ripples across the top. It's kind of the upside down version where you have upward moving air that hits a stable layer where temperature is increasing with height and it kind of bounces along. Gravity waves are pretty common in the atmosphere overall, but it's possible. And it's kind of an area for research is kind of the upward part of this wave. If it moved across the storm at the right time, could have gave it a little extra boost. It's really an area that we need to research more. I know UAH and some others are interested in that. Again, to see that, and of course, it's still a challenge from a warning operation because, again, we see gravity waves all the time. It doesn't automatically mean a tornado, but it could be an extra clue potentially. And just some of our kind of thoughts from the event. Again, we've talked about risk areas. And if there's any kind of risk out, then people need to be aware of severe weather. In this case, it was kind of a low probability, high impact type of event. So kind of any risk area we do to make sure people are prepared. Let's see. So as far as messaging, it's always a challenge because we're in marginal risk. Seems like about every week for about 6 months out of the year here. And so how do we message that? But certainly once we have a watch out, we definitely want people to start paying attention for that. Overall, just important to look at multiple things with the storm and kind of look at the overall trends, not just individual scans, and also to consider past cases. All right.
That's outstanding, Jason. Congratulations on a job well done to you and your entire team. I want to ask the panel before we advance to talk to Lisa here. Any questions for Jason at this point, based on what we saw? And Lisa, you probably were looking at that thinking that to look like a bucket of spilled paint on there, but we want to hear some of your input on the weather side of it too. But Tim, Troy, Kim, anybody, Jennifer, Aubrey, Nate, any questions for Jason?
Jason, great job. Great job, Jason. Yeah.
Definitely.
Thanks.
It was a wonderful Jason, overview.
One of your most impressed customers is on with us tonight, in Lisa. Lisa, tell us what you were doing that night at 10:33.
Well, I can tell you that once I heard the warning go out, probably around 9 o'clock, I'd already called the hotel. The girl that was there, she was fairly new. So I called over earlier, and even though we have emergency procedures, she had not actually been through one. You can't really practice for a tornado. So I called her and I said, I'll be watching the weather, and if it gets bad, the hotel is actually my safe haven because I live in an apartment and I'm actually on 3rd floor. So I always go to the hotel because I know that's the safest place for me. And it gives me the ability to actually be in the hotel. So around, I would guess around 10:30 when I first heard it was a warning, I got up and I got dressed and I was like, okay, I'm gonna head over. And then I called her and I said, there's a warning. Go ahead and start calling everybody and getting them down to the first floor. And I'll be right over. So I get dressed, and before I could get to my front door, all I could feel was like the door was vibrating. So I stopped and I was like, okay, that's not good. And I immediately ran to my tub. But before I could even get out of the tub, she was calling me back to say, hey, the windows of the hotel are blown out. And I said, okay, no worries, just stay calm and I'll be there in just 1 second. And it happened in an instant. And my guess is the tornado came over my apartment complex first, and then it hit the hotel. And when I got there, we were not prepared for the damage that we saw. I think even the people on the inside of the building did not recognize that that the entire fourth floor, well, half of the fourth floor was off, and the entire side of the breakfast area was gone. So trying to get over there first, there were trees down. So I had to leave my car, and I actually ended up climbing over trees and walked halfway there before my night auditor was able to pick me up and bring me all the way there. When the guests got outside and everybody like kind of looked back at the hotel, they didn't even realize what had happened to them. So here we are standing out in the rain at Old Charlie's, and I'm thinking, one, where are all these people going to go? Two, do we have everybody? Did everybody come down when she called them? And she said, I think I have everybody here. She even had the list with her. She was like, I think everybody's here and I've accounted for everybody. She said, but people keep wandering off. And I said, okay, well, we just got to handle the ones that were here. Yeah. So I made a call to our sister property, the Home 2, and said, will you take them in? Whatever the cost is, we'll pay for it, just as long as they have a place to go. She said, well, we don't have power. I said, well, right now, shelter is kind of more important than power. So we got to pick our demons. So we start trying to get them shuttled over, and we only had 2 cars because I ended up leaving my car for the rest of the night. So we were shuttling guests back and forth over to Home 2. And I think at this time, there was a second wall that was coming through. And remember, we're outside. And Fultondale Fire Department had actually came on and they had explained to us that the building wasn't safe. At that time, we didn't have a structural engineer who could say, you can go back into the building. So everyone was afraid to kind of go back into the building. So as the second line comes through, I remember calling Justin at the fire department. And it's just, I'm blessed to be in a small town where you actually have the cell phone number of the fire chief where you can just pick up the phone and call them. And I explained that we were outside and we were in the rain. And in a matter of seconds, there were ambulances that were pulling up to Old Charlie's parking lot, and they were giving the guests shelter.
Hey, Lisa, can I ask you a question? How many guests did you have there that night, Lisa?
I had about 45.
Okay.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah.
We were filling up really fast because people were pulling off of the highway trying to get away from the storm. And that typically happens for us. When it rains, we automatically fill up. And so it was challenging, but we got through it that night. No one got hurt. Everything was in order. And I'm lucky that we had a building that was built mostly out of brick. I don't think a new building would have sustained that. You could, even going back into the building, you could see periods where the foundation of the wall was kind of pulled apart, but it was still standing.
Lisa, do you realize, and do your colleagues probably realize how many lives you saved that night?
I think we do now. I think we were all running on adrenaline that night, and I think we do now. We're trained to put the guests first, to take care of the guests. We are just fortunate that they came down. A lot of times, I've had a lot of tornado warnings in hotels where you call them and people don't take it serious because they're not familiar with tornado warnings, so they don't come down. But luckily, the bulk of them came down. And those who didn't come down, they got the message.
Yeah. It's interesting looking at the pictures. And I think, you probably think a lot. You mentioned, Lisa, you live in an apartment, on the third floor, the place where you live, you've thought a lot about what it's made out of and where the safe place is, but that's not something that I think most hotel guests put a whole lot of thought into. And somebody who, as Bill knows, as somebody who's spent some nights in some hotels recently, I'm just I'm finding a place to pull in and get off the road for the night, just like your customers there were just trying to come in. Yeah. I'm not really thinking about, which structural engineering firm signed off on this building and what it's made out of. And to think that, you just sort of go into the presumption that it's going to be safe and it's going to take care of you. But at the end of the day, you still have to hear the warnings, and maybe you live in a multi-story brick house with a nice basement and everything, and you can go in and take shelter. Yeah. But if they place you on the third floor or fourth floor of a hotel, that's not your normal thing. You're out of your normal deal. And you got to think, well, how does this tornado warning that normally I would just go to the basement and just go on with my life, how does that affect me in a hotel? So it's really fascinating to hear the procedure that you went through and that your team went through to get everybody to come down to the first floor.
Well, from a hotel standpoint, and I've been in the hotel business for a while, when guests are traveling, like you said, that's the last thing on their mind. It's our job to think for them, to have those procedures in place so that we can take care of them, and to just have a process that's easy and it works. Before now, there's months where, there's times out of the year where we will train our staff on, if there's a tornado, even if it's during the daytime, this is where we come. You don't take the elevator, you take the stairs. We have drills for that. We got really lucky that we had such a large space, the way that the hotel's made. The corridor is really large where they could fit in between it. But I've managed hotels where the space has been like really tight, where they wouldn't have had, everyone would have been packed in almost like, sardines, to say the least. And we just, we were blessed that night because it could have went a whole lot different. We look at the cars that were smashed on the side, and that's typically where we park. Is where if I could have been able to get out of the complex, I would have pulled right up. That would have been my spot.
We're glad you weren't driving at that time, Lisa.
I am glad to.
So James, when the first pictures were tweeted out about that, you weren't certain that was actually from this tornado, were you? And when I first saw them, I knew that was the hotel in Fultondale because we ran it at one time. When it first opened 20 years ago.
The problem, you get so many pictures that are bogus. They're from some event 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 5 years ago, not even in this remotely close to you. And you have to be really careful, in a situation like that. So we first started seeing a couple of photographs of that, and we just weren't sure that was actually what happened. And finally,
it was hard to believe. It was hard to believe
right.
That it really was in Birmingham.
Yeah.
Right. And, you'd think that type of structural damage would not be the case up in there. But again, we've got some credible reports from people we knew that were up there. And of course, ultimately, the news people went up there. So it was a shock. And that's when you started to realize, okay, this is not some little, EF0, 3-minute tornado here. This is going to be a potent tornado. And the concern shifted to loss of life. And, I'll say this for Jason, that warning, and I don't think we would have had a warning 10 years ago, 15 years ago. That would have gone unwarned probably until it did most of the damage. But that warning, you had one fatality, and that's one too many. That 14-year-old boy that died. It was a horrible story. But that thing could have killed 30 people. 30 at least, maybe more, considering the hotel that was hit there. So the warning and the action that Lisa took, and everything worked that night. The system really worked very well.
So Kim, you had a question that I want to ask Tim some engineering questions about looking at that building.
Sounds good. I think you guys, several of you have raised a really interesting issue. Lisa, you were talking about how there are a lot of nights you get storms, and a lot of nights you get setups like this. Jason, you talked about that it's kind of tough to communicate really effectively in a way that catches people's attention. I'm really interested to hear from Jason and from Lisa what your impressions were of how much did people know that this was even possible? One of the difficulties in my area of work, I do work on the sort of social and behavioral science side. We don't often get a lot of data after events to know how much people anticipated the outcome. And so, Jason, if you were out during damage surveys, or anyone in the office was, you probably know more than me or any of my colleagues do about how that unfolded. So very interested to just hear what you guys thought about that. Was this a complete surprise and people had to kind of come up with a way to respond on the fly, like you were describing, Lisa, to some extent for yourself? Or was there at least a little bit of preparedness? How did that go?
I wasn't on any of the damage surveys, so I'm not quite sure what people knew going ahead of it. I know they were in the people that definitely got the warning and took action. And it's always hard for this day of type event. So, it's really best that messaging start days in advance, because then people start talking to each other, versus the day of. It's definitely a bigger challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Jason, the thing I remember with James, we sat here, as Bill pointed out, on this show that night. And up until 9 or 9:30, we kept watching that part of the storm, Jason, out toward Tuscaloosa, more off to the southwest, and nothing had really happened. Not that we were disappointed about that, but as we wrapped up the show at 10 o'clock that night, you could tell with that storm out there around Tuscaloosa. I had it on the GR level radar on the other screen in my old office, and I was sitting there watching it. And at 10 o'clock, I was getting a little more concerned with that. And like you said, with your great rundown of the history of that system, the thing that, Kim, to me, this makes me happy, because the Weather Service did an excellent job. We got people like Lisa that are in the hotels, and they have a plan. Please go with what Kevin Clazel tells us. Hope is not a plan. Now I'll add to that. Hope is not a damn plan. Okay. You've got to have that. You've got to have what Bruce has with the Midland weather radios. It's something that this shows how well this can work. Now I will tell you a story that it was pretty amazing, and Bruce knows a little bit about this with what I call the previous Bruce. But about a year ago, I was out in Guam again. You know that I like going to Guam, and I worked with Midland about getting a couple of weather radios and taking them out to the Hilton Spa and Resort out at Guam. I knew some of the people. I knew they had an EOC there at the hotel when they have tropical cyclones, and took a couple of Midland weather radios out there, courtesy of Midland. And those people were so happy. They used them and they upgraded their weather radios. They had old ones, and courtesy of Midland, they have weather radios. But this is all part of the plan. I'm amazed by this, and I congratulate Jason for a job well done, and James for a job from the broadcasters well done, and from Lisa's standpoint, where you got to admit Lisa's job's the hardest, because you got 45 people in the hotel didn't check in for a tornado.
Right.
They checked in for a night of sleep.
Mm-hmm. So, and like she highlighted, might not even be from the area. A lot of people who don't know about this stuff at all. It's all the more impressive what you were able to do. Something that was really interesting that Bill mentioned too, I think, is an area of opportunity for us to try to help the Lisas of the world as we go on in the future. And Jason discussed some of this. Bill really honed in on the STP, significant tornado parameter, so the mesoscale environment. And you were talking about how you were starting to get a little concerned, as the event drew near. This is a time scale where we don't necessarily communicate a whole lot to people, even though as meteorologists, we might be sitting there thinking, things are kind of starting to cook in the atmosphere surrounding these storms. And that, that can sort of help to delineate what is a place where maybe there's going to be something where this isn't just a typical conditional storm, like the conditions are actually lining up for you. And at that 1 to 2 hours ahead of time scale, there can be some really good evidence we can rely on to say something. If people haven't all been preparing and sheltering ahead during the watch, because watches are really big, they're really long, maybe we can give something out in this time scale that can really help people who have the responsibilities Lisa has in trying to manage a lot of people. It's a really difficult task to do in 13 minutes. In an hour, maybe you can get some more coordination going. So Bill, I was just really struck by you mentioning that. I think that's a really important part of this story.
Well, and having a good tornado plan, I would not have my hotels have any less of a tornado plan than anybody in the universe. But when I saw the pictures that night, it gave me pause. A big part of what we do too is to give a letter to the guests that are checking in on a day where there is a risk, especially when they're expected to be watches and things like that. And some of the things that it does is highlight what county you're in, because the average traveler doesn't know what county they're in. So, in this case, Lisa would be telling them to look for Jefferson County because that's where her hotel was. I am excited that the state of Oklahoma is pushing some legislation, Kim, and you and I have spoken about this before, that would legislate that hotels give that information to their guests. And I applaud them tremendously. Because I think that's important. We also point out the television, the local television stations, because we don't want them watching, TNT or TBS or something, when there's a tornado coming. And then we tell them, in advance what we're going to do if a warning is issued, and that we do expect them to come down. And my experience, Lisa, you can comment on this, because we've had numerous tornadoes approach hotels. Unfortunately, we've never been hit. The guests really appreciate it, and very few of them get upset, and 90% of them will participate in the process, even if that means they're standing stacked like cordwood pre-COVID in the laundry or whatever your safe space is. But I want to ask Tim Marshall, Tim, when I look at that building, it scared the bejesus out of me, because I knew that building was partial masonry with steel stud, in parts of it. But I never thought that hollow core plank would break like that, Tim. And I guess I was just wrong.
Well, the hollow core planks, they're for roofing and for flooring, right? So that's what I don't know about the flooring situation really here, and see if that was that hollow core plank or not. But there's minimal reinforcement to those, and they're minimally attached. They typically just lay them. So I hate to use the house of cards analogy, but looking at this image here, I'm seeing, that we have the kind of that scenario here. They're very heavy, so when they break, they're going to start to fall, and then of course they pick up momentum and start to break through floors that way. So, I have to go back to the way these buildings are built. These hotels are built no better than your house in terms of what the building code says. And the way the building codes are, they're equivalent to about a 90 mile per hour, 3-second gust. And that's the minimum. And that's the goal, unfortunately, and I've used this analogy many times. We've all taken tests, haven't we, in our life? And the night before the test, and you're trying to study for it, what's your goal? Is your goal to pass, which is usually 70%? Is that your goal? If you study just enough and you get a 71, well, then do you feel great? Do you feel great about that? Or should your goal be to try to build above the code, and then with all the workmanship factors and installation issues, that you actually meet the code? Or what's the problem with exceeding it? Well, I know it's an economic problem, but it's actually better to do that. But I'm looking at this image here, and I'm seeing these planks that are actually flipped, as what it looks like to me. And, I question the attachments, whether or not that was attached. And so when you break the windows and you pressurize the inside, it actually lifts or balloons the inside and floats these very heavy planks. And it can do that. if the planks were anchored down, well, that wouldn't have happened. So what this image tells me, and of course, I didn't look at this on site, but what I can suspect here is that those planks were not anchored down. They were just simply held there by good old gravity.
So Tim, is that an opportunity for a hotel or because a lot of hotels are built out of this hollow core planking system, either on concrete blocks or, hybrid between, steel studs and concrete blocks. Is that an opportunity to go back and retrofit those buildings? Or if you're building a hotel, it's probably critical to make sure those attachments are there.
Obviously, if I'm the engineer of record in building design, I would like to build above the code. But of course, I'm going to get a lot of heat from somebody saying, oh, it's too expensive. It's too expensive to do that. It's really not that expensive. We're talking simply about anchoring down these planks. And they're saying, the counter is, well, these planks weigh tons. Come on, man. They're not going to go anywhere. Well, here you go. Here's your evidence right here. What does that tell you? And that's just air, folks. That's all that was. It wasn't like a big old crane sat on top of this thing and pulled these up. Oh, what did that, what you see in front of you, is air. That was it. How light is air? I mean, come on. So that's just, it calls into question the building practices. And without getting myself too deep in trouble here, I'm just going to say, I'm suspect what I see here. It calls into question my many, many years of surveying that Fultondale, we got a problem.
So Tim, if that had been a wood frame construction building, it's conceivable you could have lost the top floor or parts of the top floor.
Absolutely.
And it could have been even worse. So the bathrooms are probably not a refuge of last resort, like I kind of at one point thought there might be if we didn't have time to get everybody down, if the warning didn't come soon enough.
Well, in the case of these hotels, your bathrooms are usually right adjacent to the hallway, the center hallway. So yeah, I mean, if I didn't have much in the way of warning, oh sure, I would be in the bathroom for sure, And I think in this instance you'd be okay. And
yeah,
certainly
they all survived, didn't they, Lisa? All the bathrooms were intact.
No bathroom.
Yeah, and certainly getting to the lowest floor is key. It's the number one thing you want to do, but that's assuming you have time to do that.
Mm-hmm. Tim, would the stairwells always afford protection or not? If they're
not
still
always,
reinforced concrete?
Well, not always, but typically they are the most hardened part of the building. If you've ever seen some of these hotels as they go up,
right?
They build this stairway shell first, and then the rest of the building kind of fills in around it. But that stairway is certainly, in most instances, the hardened place and is also a good place to go. But,
is that going to be the case, though, for a lot of these? The last couple of hotels I've stayed in have had the stairwells on the outside.
Right.
Like
they're on the end of the
hallway.
Building. That's right.
And then, yeah,
they typically are on the end of the building. And again, you just have to be lucky that you're on the lee side, not the windward side. So that's why we say it's not always the safest place to be, but certainly it is one of the safer places to be.
So you said that the bathrooms being along the hallway was a good thing. Which is better to be in if you have to duck somewhere really quickly? Do you go in the door to the bathroom, or do you go out the door to the hall?
Well, it all depends on time. If you've got,
and what floor you're on too.
Yeah, if all of a sudden, the windows start shattering and the power goes out, you're not going to be able to find your way around too well. I'm going to dive into the bathroom. If you got, a few minutes, maybe the stairwell. If you've got 10 minutes, get down into the lowest floor. So it all depends on time. And of course, how do you judge that? You don't, you do the best you can with that, but you certainly don't want to be outside here and go to your car and drive away from this thing. That's not something I would do. But I think get in the lowest floor if you have time. Then next is stairwells and then interior bathrooms. That's what I would recommend.
So we always give, advice in hotels to, when you check in, you're unfamiliar with the location, know where the stairwell is in case of fire. But it's probably—
I always do. Yeah, I always check where the stairwells are. They're not always at the end of the building, which tend to be a real problem in fire situations, because a lot of people, there's smoke in the hallway and they don't know where to go except maybe to the end, and then they find out there's no stairway there. But most of the modern hotels you see do have stairways at the end of the building, but it's not absolute. So definitely look for your exits when you get on, check into the hotel, and know your way around a little bit.
Yeah. So I think, Kim, from my standpoint, it would be, I'd want to be in the ground floor in the designated position, whatever that was. And it's most likely going to be the corridor, which is where Lisa went. You have some danger of it becoming a wind tunnel, potentially, but your team closed the fire door.
Correct.
Lisa, I heard you say, and
Correct.
that afforded some protection from the glass and things that were blowing in from the lobby.
Correct.
That was really, really important. Secondly, if I'm a guest and I got to get to a safe place and I think I got time, I'm going to take the stairs to get down to that safe place. But as my last resort, I'm going to end up in this bathroom.
Right.
When the tornado comes, when the 1936 Gainesville tornado happens again tonight, I'm going to be in that bathroom right there. So, Lisa, what else will you do differently next time? What's going to be different? And you're probably a shining star in Stafford Hospitality's crown at your next managers meeting, I bet.
Hindsight is always 20/20. I think that I love the fact that you gave the guest a letter. And that's something going forward, that when we're back, and we were 4 floors then, we'll be 5 floors when we come back. So we'll be even bigger. That we will definitely give out letters during inclement weather, because I think that will help the guests too, instead of relying on the front desk to notify them as they check in that we're expecting bad weather. Yeah.
I do think that's really good advice, and I'm glad you're going to do it. Now, I know Bruce Jones is going to send you a new gold-plated weather radio for when you open back up. Bruce, you got any 24-karat gold-plated ones over there you can send Lisa?
Well, I want to encourage Lisa to tell her story to the hospitality industry, because it's so important. When somebody's lived through this and done the right things, it's so important to share that message with people. So I encourage you to speak out to your fellow hospitality workers and let them know about this is the right way to do it. So I hope you do that.
And Stafford is definitely taking advantage of that. We only have 3 hotels, but we're mostly real estate. But all of our hotels, we have all come together on one accord when it comes to that training.
And Lisa, you mentioned that you knew that a warning had been issued. I guess you've always understood the difference between a watch and a warning, right?
Definitely, because I grew up in the South, and I've been through tornadoes before. And I don't, it's so funny because before that night, my staff would always make fun of me, that they would call me like the weather girl. It was like, I don't even listen to the weather. Just ask Lisa what the weather's going to be, because I keep track of it. I want to know. I don't want to be caught off guard. And to me, it's routine for me to always tell the clerk on duty, there's going to be weather tonight. So before we left, we already knew that we were expecting some inclement weather. We didn't know how serious it was going to be, but I wanted her to be prepared. So we always talk about it. It's a topic of conversation, especially in our huddles.
Well, Lisa, that young lady has her training now, right?
Yes.
Tell us about her, Lisa. Yeah. Tell us her name if she wants us to share it, and give her credit for what she did.
Yeah, Carla Jones.
Yeah.
And it's raining now. Speak up.
Well,
she did really well. Really, really well.
Good.
Yeah. I couldn't have asked her for anything more. Yeah.
Well, Lisa, we've held you a long time tonight and put you through a lot of boring meteorology here, but it sounds like you maybe appreciated it more than we thought.
I do. I do.
Is there anything else you want to say to the Weather Enterprise tonight? Here, you got broadcasters, you got private, you've got National Weather Service, you got a little bit corporate, you got a little bit of everything. Anything you want to say to us?
Because I don't think if they had put that warning out, we wouldn't have known the severity of it. I would not have had the lead time that I had. Originally I was on my way to bed. So I want to thank them because I think their warnings really saved our lives. It gave us a heads up.
Yeah,
well, Lisa, I'll send you a NOAA weather radio for the front desk, and I'm also going to send you a strobe light that you can plug into that weather radio.
Okay. Awesome.
Bruce muted himself somehow.
Sorry, the strobe lights and the pillow shakers are actually designed for the deaf and hard of hearing, but in a hospital, in a nursing home, in a hotel, where you don't want to make a bunch of noise at 2 a.m. when a watch is issued, it's nice to have these, and then you can set the radio for silent mode. So you'll get a bright strobe light. This will vibrate on the tabletop, and whoever is at the front desk will know that a new watch or warning has just been issued, and they can check the NOAA weather radio. I think these should be standard in every hotel in America.
I agree. That is awesome.
I'll send you some.
Thank you.
Well, Lisa, thank you for being with us tonight. We've really enjoyed having our time with you, and we're honored to have had your presence.
It was my pleasure.
And
thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Well, I think it's pretty amazing that the system kind of worked here from top to bottom, ladies and gentlemen, for the most part.
The good thing about the timing of that, all the local newscasts were going off right as that warning was issued. And again, I know that doesn't come into the consideration, but Jason's warning was at a perfect time because often when the local stations dump out of the late news and you go to programming, you lose, most of your audience. And literally we were about to roll the outro and it hits. So all the stations were able to stay on and stay with it. So the timing was good. I thought the lead time was good. A really good friend of mine lost their home, precious family, husband, wife, 2 children. I mean, there was nothing left. It was sheared off, and they were down in the basement, and they made it through there. And so I spent some time up there, several days up there kind of helping him. And again, I'm telling you, the death toll, the fact that and one is too many, but it could have been 20, 30, 40 people that died that night. So I think that's a sign of how well the warning system worked that night. Can we still make it better? Absolutely. But goodness gracious, you had 8, 9, 10 minutes lead time for that kind of tornado. I don't think there would have been a warning 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's really scary. And then the WEA alerts didn't work.
Yeah, we need to talk about that.
We had that stacked against us that night.
So who knows the inside baseball on that deal? Does anybody know why the WEA failed? Bruce Jones? I mean, I know you don't know, but it's a reason why we always say you got to have 2 ways.
Yeah. And, it's not the first time that it's happened either. So, yeah, just have more than one way to get these warnings because you never know when one system or the other might not be working that day or that night. So have multiple redundant ways of receiving your warnings. That's the most important message. And, the other thing I would like to say, I think people sometimes they poo-poo these watches. We get a lot of people when they program their weather radio, they want to turn off severe thunderstorm watch. They want to turn off tornado watch so they're not bothered. I'm like, well, that's the little signal that you need to be kind of ready and thinking ahead of time. So especially for the hotel industry, the issuance of a watch is really the time to brief your crew that there may be something different going on this evening. So let's not ignore those watches. They're still vitally important. In fact, maybe as important as the warning when it comes out because you're ready. You're ready to go.
Hey, James and Jason, the circumstances of the 14-year-old boy that was killed, do we know what was happening there or anything?
As I understand it, Troy, the family heard the warning and they took their precautions. They did the right thing.
Mhm.
And somehow it was a tree or some object came in and was responsible for that fatality. I don't know the exact details, but from those that live up there and listening to their stories, I understood that they heard the warning and they responded.
Okay.
So to my knowledge, we did not have any loss of life from anybody that didn't know it was coming. So, I mean, it really worked well. And I think maybe, all the years have paid off of lessons we've learned working with people like Kim and the social science things and everything else, and the Lee County thing took us back. I mean, we thought we had really made some improvements. And then all of a sudden we had that Lee County tornado, that killed 23 people, and thinking, oh goodness, that set us back. But this was very encouraging. So we'll see how it goes this week. And we'll do the weather roundup here in just a little bit, but it looks like another rough day for the southern states here later this week.
Yeah, Jason, what's your thoughts on our event that's coming in?
I mean, from the synoptic perspective, I mean, it's got kind of all the ingredients you look for a textbook. It'll just come down to the mesoscale and how each storm evolves.
Hey, Jason, I want to ask you. I want to ask you a question. So you're the guy sitting there with your finger on the trigger. To tell people how it's not easy. Okay, it's not easy. Tell them how challenging this is, because you're going to see signatures and you're going to see, temptations to hit that button, issue a tornado warning. The POD is going to be 100 out of this office, but your false alarm ratio goes nuts. How hard is it working the warning desk?
I mean, I think a lot of times the hardest thing to do is to not issue the warning. The easiest thing is issue warning, kind of relax a little bit. So yeah, it's definitely intense.
And like today's a great example. So Everybody freaked out. Okay. I mean, they freaked out here about 3:00 this afternoon. And we had a little shower that was rotating. And to my knowledge, there was no thunder. It was a shower, and we had a pretty good looking wall cloud here. I mean, it looked good.
Good looking downtown Birmingham. Radar too.
Right. Looking north, you had the kidney bean thing going on the radar. And, there was rotation. It was kind of broad. And boy, if I were sitting down out there at the Weather Service, I thinking, goodness gracious, in fact, it was going right over Fultondale, the same place that was hit January 25th.
Are your owners moving the hotel, Lisa, before they rebuild it? They may want to move it to another city.
They're going to be back in the same spot.
Oh, great.
But, I'm just thinking, how hard would it be if you're sitting there? And again, I don't know. I would assume the Weather Service has access to all these images that I'm seeing. I had the sky cam looking at it. I mean, in fact, I left my post here in this room and went to Studio A, mic'd up. I was ready to go on television in case somebody hit the button down there. But whoever was working today, they chose not to do that. And that was the right thing to do. There was no tornado. There was no damage, yet everybody was freaking out. So, and again, I think that's one of the things that's happened here that people don't really appreciate is how they work so hard down there to reduce the number of false alarms.
Yes.
And I've heard conflicting stories from Kim and the social folks on, how important is the FAR? Kim, how important is the FAR? I'll put her on the spot right now, and then I'll comment from there.
Oh Lord! I mean, you're
come on now.
Because the research is contradictory. It just sort of depends on where you look at it and how you look at it. There's some suggestion that in your area of the world there was a bit of a problem, that there was a credibility hit, and some people who were more reluctant to take, precautions when there was a warning for a time. But we don't find that everywhere. So it's a little bit tough for us to say. Humans are a little bit tougher than the atmosphere in that we can change our mind and we can grow and evolve our thinking. And so that's certainly something that's happening here. As the practices are changing, I'm sure that people in Alabama are changing their thoughts on this too. So that's something that we're continuing to investigate. I kept that as short as I could. Is that good?
Well, yes. And I've heard the same thing. I've heard contradictory sets of data about this, but I still think, it is important because, again, I go to the Dollar General. That's where I do my research. You go down to the Dollar General and you will talk with people and they will tell you things.
Yep.
That's where real people are that we serve. And you will hear this a lot in the Dollar General. I hear those things all the time and nothing ever happens. And they're basically saying we got a cry wolf problem here. And I'm not saying it's happened recently. This was the way it was 10 years ago. But what they've done down there, it's just been phenomenal at the Weather Service where Jason works to reduce the number of false alarms. And in my little pea-brain opinion, it has done wonders for the warning process. Warnings mean something again. Instead of these dime a dozen warning. Now when there's a warning, it means something. And I've tried to communicate that with people, and I think people are starting to pick up on that. So, and like Jason says, I think the hardest thing to do is to keep your finger off that button and not issue a warning. So.
Well, James, I mean, we had, I think we had Kevin on the show, and he told us that Birmingham sat down, the WFO BMX sat down a few years ago and said, you know what, let's look at this. It doesn't mean that we're going to do anything to string Jason up or anything and see that he doesn't do this. I trust Jason. I trust Jason to do the right thing, but take a look at it and critically think about it. And I tell you, I have nothing but compliments for Birmingham WFO. I think by looking at that, they admit that at least they're willing to critically think about the possibility that there are too many warnings out there overall in the United States.
Yep. What's been so amazing about what Birmingham has done is you reduce the false alarms without killing the probability of detection. And you're using, and when they were on the show, Kevin talked about how, you're using the mesoscale analysis more effectively to be able to discern cases like when you were going through your overview, Jason. I mean, that is needle in a haystack stuff to try to find the area of rotation, what could happen there. But you were concerned and you were really, really looking for it because of the antecedent conditions that were looking juicier. And, that just doing some of that has been remarkable. It'd be foolish of me, in the behavioral sciences to talk about how it doesn't matter. Of course, what you've done matters. And the more that you can make the alarm true to the reality of the situation, the more trust is going to increase. So I don't want to carry off the message like, oh, false alarms, you can just chuck those out there. That's certainly not true. And there's going to be a limit to it. The question really becomes, where's that sweet spot? Where you kind of go off of a cliff where people are like, I don't buy it anymore. It's a possibility that's kind of where Birmingham used to be, sort of on this little knife's edge. And I would bet you anything that people are starting to take notice that a warning really means something. And it's important for us to capture that so that you can be properly, acknowledged in the efforts that you're making to make warnings more credible. I agree with everything James just said. It's amazing what's been accomplished.
We're giving you an attaboy, Jason.
Yeah.
We're going to get him out of his shell here before the show is over.
Yeah, you're good at that, James. So you're sure good at that.
Hey, Tim Marshall, you didn't by chance go to Fultondale, did you?
No, I did not. It just has to be a pretty good tornado with a lot of different building damage indicators for me to go, usually 3 or better, something like that before I go. And I've been actually quite busy with the other damages that have happened. I'm still working on Nashville. I'm still working on Jonesboro, and of course Dallas even got hit with a tornado. So I'm working on those surveys as we speak. Trying to get papers.
You're like the rock star. You're the Elvis of the of the survey guys. I mean, really. I'm not blowing smoke. I mean, Tim is like a legend. It's kind of cool having him on the show here. So,
well, James, I'm all shook up.
That's the show title right there. So tell me, and I'd looked at all these houses in Fultondale, and I'd be honest with you, I just think there was some construction that was not up to par. If you were there, you would have been disappointed. But has times changed with the new construction techniques especially for residential areas? The codes, is it any better now than it was 10, 20, 30 years ago, the new construction that's coming up?
Not really. I have argued for 40 years, my career, about building better. There are glimpses and glimmers of hope, and there have been some good success stories. I know Moore, Oklahoma has a higher code, but of course I've gone up and looked at some of these houses that are being built to the higher code, and I've seen some disappointments. In Florida says, well, we're just going to have our own building code. So the state of Florida says their more stringent code, and in some aspects, it is a better code. And a lot of roofing contractors say that it's a bear installing a roof down there, because they have to come out. The inspector's got to come out twice just to see if the underlayment or the anchor sheet is down properly, and then to see about how the shingles or tiles are put on properly. So in Florida, it takes a long time, and it's more arduous to put on a roof than it is, say, in Fulton Dale. So, in some regards, it's a good thing that there's some oversight and there's better codes. But of course, as we all know, those codes have got to be enforced, because not everybody is going to just say, okay, we'll put straps in instead of nails, and you're not going to get that. My biggest success is the educated consumer. The consumer who says, okay, I'm going to build a house, and okay, we do want a big kitchen and we want granite countertops, but we would like to have straps where the trusses anchor down the walls and where the walls go into the floor. We want straps in those locations, and we want solid sheathing, not this cardboard ply stuff that they put around a house. We want solid sheathing, be it either oriented strand board or plywood, which I prefer plywood, to box in the house and lock in the frame. So, and I've been preaching this, as you all know, for the last 40 years, and we still have a mass problem. I mean, it's sort of like, it kind of reminds me of this COVID-19 wear a mask thing. It's that with time, it seems like masks get lost or not used. I mean, it's a good idea. And I think everybody says, hey, this is a great idea. But, who's going to wear one and for how long? And before long, people just get tired of this. And I know there's maybe Kim can harp about this, but it's like people get tired of this, and they're just now saying, well, the heck with it, and that's kind of the building community. It's sort of a short-term memory. You get a violent tornado comes through. Oh yeah, definitely. That year after that tornado, build it better, put the straps in. But a couple of years after that, let's go back to the old way it was, and that's human nature, right, Kim? Yeah.
I'm gonna be wearing my mask 5 years from now. I've lived in it. I'll wear that stupid thing till the cows come home. I'll tell you what.
I can't wait.
Hey, Tim. Mine. So let's say that somebody's building a new house, a family. They've been married for 10 years, got a couple of kids, need more room. They're going to build a new house, new construction. They're building in Norman, Oklahoma, Huntsville, Alabama, Jackson, Mississippi. And where can they go to? You've given some really good information. What's a good source for them in terms of talking to their builder about a really good fortified home that will do better during tornadoes?
You just mentioned the word. It's called the Fortified Program, and IBHS. You can go on their website, the Institute for Building and Home Safety. I think it's ibhs.org, but they have a fortified program, and it's a step-by-step process, and you can actually get your house certified. And this will be great if you want to sell your house. Say you're in a tornado-prone area, which, in Dixie Alley, there you are, tornado-prone area. Would you be, as a willing buyer, more apt to buy a house that's certified to be fortified? I think I would. I mean, but I'm an engineer. So I would say that that's something you should look into. And of course, it's for new construction. It's very difficult to retrofit an existing house to make it better in terms of building. But you have to tear out some sheetrock. But if you're doing some remodeling, I mean, there you go.
So do you know Roy Wright by any chance, Tim?
It doesn't ring a bell.
He is the president and CEO of the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, and they do all this work with fortified homes. I was going to say he's got some interesting stats too. But I think we in the us practitioners that deal with the public, we need to do a better job, I think, of communicating this, because I have not. And we could do better, because there's a lot of folks that, the young couples, they need a new house and they want to build a new home. And they're talking about, the kitchen and this and this and this. But this is important stuff. And we've had so many severe weather events here that I think they would be very interested to hear some of this. And it's not going to add $50,000 to the cost of a house,
no,
is it?
By no means. And in fact, Fortified is a good program, not only for tornadoes, but obviously for hurricanes. And you've heard some of these success stories, like in Hurricane Michael down in Mexico Beach. There was this one house that happened to stand where all the other houses were destroyed. Well, what separated that house out was that it was better built, and it was up high enough so that the storm surge would go underneath it, and it was far away from the water, so it wouldn't have the sand scour away of its foundation. So, just a little bit, and an ounce of prevention. Oh, you know what that one is? Yeah, absolutely. It's an ounce of prevention. Is it can prevent a pound of cure? Is that it? I don't know, something like that.
Heard that before.
Yeah, have you?
Yeah.
But why was Grandma right? I mean, there's something to be said about that. Yeah, think about where you're going to build, what you want. We all want nice kitchens. We all want nice bedrooms, big living rooms, big yards, but also add one more important thing, and that is you want it anchored down, because especially in your area where there's not a lot of houses put on slabs, they put them on pier and beam, and that means an unanchored house for the most part.
We've still got houses sitting on a slab with gravity, and it's just sitting there.
Well, I've seen, I've surveyed damage in the area, Birmingham area, several times, and from 98 was a bad one, and the one that was in 2011. So, and I've seen just atrocious construction practices, and it's just like we're not learning how to better build for some reason or another. Now, is it an economic thing, or is it like, well, Grandpa told me how to build a house and I'm building it the same way over and over and over again? There's maybe a bunch of factors involved with it. And again, like my analogy earlier, the goal being, let's build it to the minimum, because that's what the law says. And it's like, no, you need to think about building it above code. And there's no real penalty. You're not going to get a ticket for building it above code. But again, it will cost a little more. It won't cost $5,000 more, but it'll cost most of the builders I talk to maybe $1,000 more, maybe $1,500 more max on a house to strap it down and put solid sheathing on it. And it's like, well, what's the average price of a house? Isn't that about maybe 1 or 2% extra cost? And of course, you're going to be paying a mortgage. So it's like, that's small potatoes. That's really what it's about. I think it's worth it myself to get that extra level of security. And then, of course, you got the other naysayers saying, well, if it's an EF5, all bets are off. Well, that's true. But what are the odds of getting an EF5 at your house? You're more likely to get just a 90 to 120 mile an hour wind rather than a 200 mile an hour wind.
All right. Well, great. So,
and James, on May the 3rd, Jim Ledoux has put together a really cool panel. Tim, we need to get you to come back if you're not deep in some supercell and Oklahoma or North Texas on that night.
Did you say May 3rd?
Yeah, unfortunately. But the point of that night, James, is about how incumbent it is upon us as meteorologists to push this idea of more resiliency and better building codes and all those things. That's what we'll be talking about that night.
And Kim, did you want to say something? I cut you off. I'm sorry.
Oh, I have a quick question. Something I've been just undyingly curious about. Tim, I'm hoping you can address it. You've talked about, building construction practices not changing, and for reasons unknown, not evolving. But something I've noticed that I'm wondering if it's an issue for tornado safety is fashion. So housing preferences are moving toward this open concept where we have fewer interior walls in houses, and a lot of people are knocking these things out to try to make their houses more open. Does this have any structural effect, or an effect, do you think, maybe for tornado safety, as there are fewer walls between an individual and the tornado if they were to try to seek refuge in an interior room?
Yes, I think there is some of that. I mean, most of our interior walls are what we call partition walls. They're really not structural. They don't carry much in the way of load, except in these old style houses that I used to have, where we had a center hallway. And that center hallway, one of those walls would be load bearing because it would take some bracing from the rafters. But yes, the open design is making houses more vulnerable. There's obviously, when we say put as many walls between you and the tornado as possible, well, what if there aren't any walls except for the exterior wall? I mean, so again, the bathroom is really the key here. The tubs, talk about fashion statements. Tubs have changed dramatically now. We have the old cast iron tubs that grandma had that, that would be a great place to put a mattress over you, and that would be a great place. But now you rarely can find those steel tubs anymore. They're usually fiberglass, and I have seen boards just go right through those things like a knife through butter.
Wow.
And Lisa probably won't have many tubs in her New Hampton. It'll probably be mostly showers.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly right.
So I'm going to warn everybody, we're going to have picks of the week here coming up real soon. So be thinking of a
I didn't
pick
warn
of
you,
the
Lisa.
week.
So if you got to get a pick of the week.
Pick of the week involving weather or just something interesting related to weather. And we've got a weather roundup segment. We've got maybe a major severe weather issue here. We'll talk about that. A lot more here, but we got to take a break as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Calling all weather enthusiasts. Join the American Meteorological Society by becoming a member of the band at amsweatherband.org. As an AMS Weatherband member, you'll get to go behind the scenes with the scientists of the American Meteorological Society, whose members have been at the forefront of weather, water, and climate research for over 100 years. You'll learn about the very latest research from the scientists who are actually doing it. What's more, you'll become a part of a passionate online community of weather enthusiasts. Get access to exclusive videos, webinars, and other fun content, and support the science you love. Learn more and join the band today at amsweatherband.org.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your Astronomy Outlook.
Yesterday morning, March 14th, a SpaceX launch from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida was visible up and down the East Coast. And that prompted more than a few "what's that thing in the sky" calls and emails into TV stations in the Carolinas, Virginia, and beyond. Now, SpaceX launches things all the time, but this launch was particularly visible because of its timing. The Falcon 9 rocket, carrying the latest batch of Starlink satellites, which are designed to provide broadband internet even to remote areas, it lifted off at 6:01 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. That's right around the beginning of astronomical twilight, or about 90 minutes before sunrise. Astronomical twilight is the point where serious astronomers start packing things up, and that's because the sun, though it's still 18 degrees below the horizon, is beginning to illuminate the upper atmosphere, and that can make seeing very distant or very faint objects a little more difficult with the telescope. This is also why the hour or two before sunrise or after sunset is prime time to see the International Space Station or other satellites as they go over. While they're illuminated by that setting or rising sun, we remain dark here on the ground, making them very easy to see. For the same reason, As that SpaceX rocket rose to the astronomical twilight, its exhaust was illuminated by the rising sun. As the rocket rose higher into that upper atmosphere, the air thins and the exhaust expands, making the launch even more visible. Even after the rocket had disappeared over the horizon and as dawn approached, the show wasn't over yet. Water droplets left behind by the rocket exhaust formed noctilucent clouds, which were also lit by the rising sun. As those droplets turned to ice in the cold mesosphere, refracted sunlight produced beautiful red and orange colors. The National Weather Service office in Melbourne, Florida, tweeted a beautiful photo of the painted sky left by the launch. Elsewhere in the sky, the March equinox and the beginning of astronomical spring in the Northern Hemisphere will arrive on Saturday, March 20th at 9:37 a.m. UTC. The sun will be directly over the equator at 37 degrees 29 minutes east at the base of Mount Kenya in the Meru province of Kenya. Also coming this week, asteroid 2001 FO32, the largest asteroid predicted to pass by Earth this year, will safely pass at about 1.25 million miles, or more than 5 times the distance of the moon. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
This week in tornado history, a tornado outbreak occurred on March 21st, 1952. Officially, the Storm Prediction Center lists 27 tornadoes, 10 of which were given an F4 rating. The deadliest tornado of the outbreak crossed 14.6 miles through White County, Arkansas. This tornado developed 2 miles to the south-southwest of Searcy. It moved to the northeast to near the Kensett area through Judsonia and passing 5 miles northeast of Bald Knob. It ended near Russell. There was considerable damage reported in Kensett. Per the Climatological Data National Summary, quote, the town of Judsonia lay squarely in the path of the storm and was almost completely leveled. At least 30 people were killed in the town. 385 homes were destroyed and 560 were heavily damaged. The business section of Judsonia was almost completely demolished. There was heavy damage in Bald Knob, where 10 people were killed. 9 more were killed in a rural area, and 1 person died on Russell's western edge. The following report appeared in the March 22, 1952 edition of the Northwest Arkansas Times. D.C. Phipps of Little Rock was driving a transport truck near Judsonia when the winds came. Suddenly, a house came flying across the highway and smashed into the truck. Phipps suffered only scratches and hitchhiked into nearby Beebe with one of the first reports of the disaster. Read about this event and hundreds more at tornadotalk.com.
And Jen, another tornado outbreak on March 21st still ranks as the deadliest tornado outbreak in Alabama history in 1932, just 20 years before that outbreak that you were talking about.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And y'all are working on a bunch of stuff for the April 27th anniversary, aren't you, Jen?
Yes, we have been busy little beavers here trying to get some writing done. Probably 70 summaries. So it's going to be a lot, and we're going to start releasing those at the end of March, and we're going to dribble them out through May because we've still got a lot to do. But we've been working hard, and we're trying to tell the story of what happened to some communities that maybe a lot of folks didn't know about. Glade Spring, Virginia is one that we're on to right now. We've reached out to Aubrey. She's going to help us out with some stuff, and reached out to James and Billy. You're going to help us as well. But there's some communities that people don't know a lot about. And so we're going to try to tell those stories. We've talked to a lot of great folks, and we're going to put all that in writing and just tell these stories, try to encompass it, and not only say this house was hit, but here are the people that were impacted, and this is how they were affected, and this is what they did to how the communities recovered. So that's our goal right now.
No, I think, Jen, that's a really good take on that. And honestly, that's something I'm trying to do with our 10-year piece. We had 5 tornadoes in the Shenandoah Valley that night, and we barely even touched at the time on Glade Spring in the southern part of the state. So I know even for me, that's something I'd like to touch on more. The Ringgold, Georgia. I mean, there are so many other strong tornadoes and other ones, other than, not to belittle the importance of Tuscaloosa, but there are other really strong tornadoes that hit some different areas than you might not typically think of, that I think it's a good opportunity to go back and showcase those small communities as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. And what we're finding is we're going, well, this will be just a small tornado that we can cover real quick. And it's taking us hours, about hours, because we're digging and we're finding all this information in the local newspapers. and we're reaching out to folks and we're finding out, how can we build upon the survey? If it says a church was hit, I want to know what church. And I want to talk to the pastor, and I want to find out how they rebuilt. And those are the things that we're trying to do with some of these stories, to really connect folks with such a big event and highlight some of these smaller communities. So we'll see how it goes here the next few weeks. Well, we're in the middle of severe weather season as well, that things are happening now, so it's a balancing act for us right now.
And hopefully sometimes these small communities, maybe that they just had that false sense of security of, we never had a strong tornado here, or we've never really seen any kind of damage like this. And for some of these small communities, the silver lining is to be prepared, and that things like this can happen in areas outside of Alabama and Mississippi.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, it's time for the Weather Roundup, and the Weather Roundup is brought to us by Tim Vasquez's Weather Graphics and all his outstanding books. Each one of us, if we were in our home office or office, we could point to some of his books on our shelves, or maybe we use some of his other tools. And I encourage everyone to be a part of Forecast Lab, his outstanding video presentation that he does on YouTube 5 nights a week. If you want to really dig into the meteorology behind the weather that's occurring in the United States and sometimes around the world, there's no better place than Forecast Lab. So check it out on YouTube. And speaking of weather across the fruited plain here, it's been a week for wild weather. Who wants to start and throw something out there? Nate Johnson, what's going on up in North Carolina these days? It's a little chilly here in Gainesville, Georgia tonight.
Yeah, it was chilly here today after a week. Most of North Carolina has gone almost 2 weeks without seeing rain, longest dry stretch here in 2 years. And that's likely to come to an end tonight and tomorrow with some rain, and then get a chance for some severe storms here on Thursday. I was actually helping out some of our corporate folks with the big snowstorm in Denver over the weekend, and took a little longer to materialize, but man, once it got going, holy moly, 27.1 inches at DIA, which is the, I think, 4th largest snow on record, regardless of the time of year, in Denver. That's a historic snowstorm, and some of the areas in the Front Range. This is just a classic sort of setup for the Front Range just to get slammed with snow. And I got to commend the Weather Service in Boulder for sticking to that one and getting everybody prepared for it, because it was a mess to say the least. They're still digging out there.
Yeah, no kidding. That was an amazing storm. Aubrey, can you talk? Are you good? So Aubrey, I'm going to be driving up through the Shenandoah Valley next week, and it looks to me like about every 3 miles there's a detour or road closure on the Blue Ridge Parkway. So it looks like a lost cause.
Yeah, I think once you have to get kind of north of Roanoke, and you should be good. Evan Fisher, one of I believe he's a grad student at Virginia Tech, did put together kind of an interactive map of the Blue Ridge Parkway closures and stuff like that. But I think once you get north of Roanoke, that might be okay. And if you have time, of course, give me a call. I'll come and meet you guys. Next week is looking great.
Harrisonburg for sure.
Awesome. We had kind of a dry spell after so much craziness with winter storm after winter storm after winter storm after mixed event and everything in February. We just dried out. And so then what happens is you get this false sense of security after several days of sunshine and a bit of wind after so much moisture. Well, guess what happens to the surface layer, that very top layer of the ground? It dries out a lot quicker than a lot of people realize, and we have a wildfire threat. So thankfully we've got rain in tonight. We've got more substantial rain on Wednesday night and Thursday. Your severe weather system is my rain system. And then nice weekend ahead, and we should start to really get into the spring temperatures next week. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, no kidding. And Bruce Jones, I know I saw Overland Park, a funnel cloud over there tonight or late this afternoon that I think Jen was referring to. Was that the tornado you were talking about?
Yeah, in fact, I don't know if you can see the wall cloud picture there. This was taken out at Richards Gebaur Air Base, the old Richards Gebaur. And I was out driving when they issued the tornado warning. So I ran out there, and then I had to come home because my daughter was here at home. But I was driving a Tesla. So I want to claim to be the first Tesla driving storm chaser. All right.
I don't know whether we can substantiate that or not, Tim Marshall. Have you seen any Teslas out there with some Allsup's burritos on the plains?
I have never seen a Tesla storm chasing per se, but then again, there's a lot of Teslas out there.
And a lot of storm chasers too.
Yeah, and a lot of storm chasers. A lot.
So Lisa, it's been warm in our environs in central Alabama. We were near record highs the last few days. We certainly were enjoying that after even though we didn't have what Mississippi and Louisiana and Texas had, we had our 16 and 12 degree readings, I think, during that time. We'll take the warm weather.
Definitely.
And Jason, we've been kind of in a little flash drought. It seems like the last couple of weeks in Birmingham. It looks like we'll make up for some of that this week.
Yeah, I was thankful to find a little bit of rain at my place today. I'm only 2/10, but we could definitely use it.
I saw a severe thunderstorm warning issued for Etowah County there. You keeping one eye on the radar over there?
Yeah, I just saw that. I saw a pretty good hail spike coming into Gadsden, so some March hail potential.
Oh, great. That's just what we need. More hail, and we'll probably get more of that on Wednesday. Kim, what's the weather like in Oklahoma?
It always amazes me when we're not the nexus of all of the disaster weather going on, but a little early in the season for it to be our turn. It's been really mild. We've been really dry as well through much of the state, and there had been some issues with wildfires in especially western portions of the state. But we had some good rain over the past few days across much of our state when we were in the warm sector, sort of ahead of this passing system that produced really cool severe weather over the weekend out in Amarillo's area. There was a pretty interesting severe weather event this weekend, but we were kind of on the boring side of it, but it was what we needed. We got rain, and then we just had this gorgeous, wonderful weekend afterwards. Clear skies, pretty dry. So yeah, everything here in Oklahoma is going pretty well right now. We might get a taste of the severe weather that'll be going through your area on Wednesday. We might see a little bit of that on Tuesday, but just the northwest portion of the state is probably at a little bit of a higher risk, sort of closer to the low. But we can always hope for a little bit of some fun, maybe storms later on in the day.
Yeah, well, we'll take boring right now. Tim Marshall, did you chase in the Panhandle this weekend?
Yes, I did, and it was a mucky mess. I mean, it's like I'm seeing on radar we have a couplet about 3 miles away, and it's like I swear I was in Alabama. It was just like it was soup everywhere. I couldn't see very much at all. We saw a few piddly tornadoes, but we didn't get on the correct storm. We were on the southern storm, and of course, the north storm is what did the big tornadoes. So it's like 50-50 chance, no rules. So pick the wrong storm, but that's all right. It was good to get out, get our feet wet, get some good comfort food, and
is that what you call it? Comfort food?
I call it comfort food. Beautiful West Texas comfort food. Barbecue, chicken fried steak. Man, it was good.
Man, Tim, I've got to say, I'm sorry for your experience, but I felt a little bit better about it because it's close enough that I could chase it. And my husband was trying to convince me to get a babysitter for the kids and make a day of it. And when we saw that it was all murky and stuff, he was like, "Oh, well, it was murky. We didn't miss anything."
Your husband was encouraging you to get a sitter so you could go chase. That's how you know you got the right guy.
Yeah,
oh my gosh, I know.
Exactly
I know.
right.
I really lucked out on this one.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Troy Kimmel, it's just awesome to have you back.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate that. It was chilly in Austin today. We got up to 87. So there you go. I want to, Nate talked about the DIA stuff, but what I really find amazing, Jason, is for your colleagues, and I have a friend that works up in the Cheyenne office. Folks, look at that look at Cheyenne, Wyoming for the last couple of days. They had 30.8 inches of snow, 2-day total, and the water equivalent or liquid water equivalent for the precip was 2.31. That is amazing. If I'm not mistaken, that may be the heaviest snowstorm in Cheyenne history. I believe it is.
If I'm not mistaken, the Ash Wednesday storm here in 1962, which was one of the biggest storms in our area, 38 inches of snow with a liquid equivalent at 2.8 inches. So very comparable.
Yeah, yeah.
Denver got the snow melted down to almost actually a little more than a fifth of Denver's annual precip.
Wow.
They got it in one storm, and it was all snow, which is a little uncommon.
That's just amazing. So, yeah. All right. Anything else you want to add, Troy?
No, that's it. Just no freezing temperatures for Austin, at least for 4 months. Got to get the damn contractors in the house. So, you know,
Yeah.
it's like Lisa. You and I are both waiting for the contractors. Okay. So I'm with you. Well, I'll be thinking about you. You be thinking about me.
And Jen Nairmore up in Flavortown in Ohio. What's your weather like? Are you still in shorts and flip flops, or
No.
have you put those away?
I had to put those away real quick. Yeah, my weather's been real moody all over the place. We got into the 60s, but it was a deceiving 60. It was still windy, and so it looked beautiful, and I'd open the window, and I'm like, oh man, I'm so cold. And so I had to close the window. And then today was 35. So I don't know. I don't know what ends up, but I think a lot of the system coming in, we're just going to get plain rain here. Not expecting any of the severe weather here. I do plan to be extremely busy on the radio though. And I do want to mention the Kansas City storms again today. And Bruce can talk about this too. It was a tricky one because there was no watch today. And so I got questioned for that. And then I was immediately, well, this was a surprise, Jen. So I got on that. So it was a very challenging day to communicate. It wasn't really a surprise. There was a 2% threat. So I thought the Storm Prediction Center did good, but everything was so isolated. I don't think it warranted a watch. And I think the National Weather Service did good on the warnings to get those out. And then I think there's still confusion on why a warning is issued. It's not necessarily that a tornado has been observed by somebody on the ground, seeing debris or seeing damage or anything. That the radars are so good now, and we are seeing rotation, and it's the Weather Service is saying that we could have a tornado at any point. So I had to explain that today, and it was interesting. And I think people think Linwood, Kansas tornado from 2 years ago. That's what they're expecting. Completely different situation. Then I had to explain that. I'm like, I'm really exhausted. It's like I went through like a severe weather class today. But there's still so much confusion on different things. And so I really appreciate what Kim does to really try to help with the messaging. And there's just so much. And for radio, if I don't have the opportunity to do that on a live like this, I never have the opportunity to do it. And so it's such a challenge. And so I'm looking at what's happening this week, and I'm thinking it's going to be hard. How do I say everything I want to say in 20 seconds when I don't have to do any watch updates or anything? I just want people to know what's happening. And so it's going to be a challenging few days, I think, with a really, possibility of a big outbreak coming in. But it's March. It's what happens. And we hope that people are ready for it and can stay safe. So.
Hey, Jennifer, the other thing here in Kansas City, our Kansas City radar is down this week for maintenance.
I noticed
that was the other challenge.
Yeah.
So I think the warnings were off the Topeka radar, which is about, 80 miles out that way. Springfield, Missouri is about 100 and something miles down this way. So National Weather Service here in Kansas City did a dynamite job on this tornado warning we had. It was just southwest and south of me today, but great job. Great job.
They did an awesome job. I was looking at the KCI radar as well.
Yeah.
The Topeka one, and then Springfield was on the one that was over Johnson County, Missouri. And so it was really difficult, but I just love how they all come together. And, but even the Weather Service in Kansas City, they were about ready to have to leave because the Pleasant Hill area was about to get hit. So they were waiting to see, it was right over them. So that was it was a challenging couple of hours there. So.
Man. Challenge. That's an understatement, having all of that go against you and the radar down. I mean, seriously, Bruce, doesn't it feel sometimes like the atmosphere knows when the Weather Service is taking a radar down for maintenance? And it's like, yes, this is my chance.
Absolutely.
Don't ever publish the schedule of radar maintenance, the coming radar
that's
maintenance.
a bad idea.
The storms read that and they figure out where they need to go.
That's right.
Oh, that's crazy. Yeah, I'm worried. I know it's subjective, but it just seems like a lot of the storm systems are overperforming this late winter, and I'm afraid. I know that's sort of superstition there, but it just feels that way to me. So I think we're gonna have a busy spring. I know James would fuss at me for saying that, but he's not here, so he'll have to edit it out of the program later. I think we covered all the weather roundups. Now time to talk to the official ambassador of NOAA Weather Radio, Mr. Bruce Jones. Bruce, we thank Midland and you for your sponsorship of the show, helping make it possible. And you introduced me to a couple things I didn't know about on this show tonight, and I got to get back and plug them into my weather radio. That pillow shaker looks like that's a really good thing. That could work, and also the strobe too.
Yeah, the NOAA weather radios, the public alert certified radios. This public alert certification is not just something that you throw on there. To be public alert certified, it has to have a certain decibel noise generator and sensitivity and this, that, and the other, but it also has the ability to plug into the external alert port on the back. And so that was designed for the deaf and hard of hearing. And so you can plug in a strobe light or a pillow shaker, or you can plug both of them in using a little Y cable. But you can have this thing set so if you're deaf and hard of hearing, you'll still get that warning, either with a bright strobe light or with the pillow shaker. And so this was designed from the get-go with NOAA Weather Radio. They wanted it to be an alerting device for people who have hearing, and those who are hearing impaired, and those who are completely deaf. So NOAA Weather Radio, this public alert certification, was really designed to make this a true indoor tornado siren. And these specifications were developed by the Consumer Electronics Association back in 2009 or something. And so they specified these are life-saving devices. You can't just make them willy-nilly. They have to be made to certain specifications and quality. So we have these pillow shakers, we have these strobes for the deaf and hard of hearing community, which are extremely vulnerable to severe weather. I mean, think about it. If you can't hear that tornado warning being issued, it's like it never came out. So we have ways of reaching out to help the deaf and hard of hearing community. And also, as I mentioned earlier, these devices can be used in a loud noise environment, like a loud factory, or a place where you don't want a bunch of noise, like the nursing station up on the 3rd floor of the hospital. They don't want an 80 decibel alert tone going off, but they do need to know that there's been a watch issued or a warning issued. And so you can set the strobe to go off. So there's a lot of different ways that these public alert certified NOAA weather radios can help people. And I just encourage everyone to continue to support the NOAA Weather Radio Network because it works.
And that's the fastest thing from Jason's fingertip on that button, to the world is that NOAA Weather Radio, Bruce. Mm-hmm. And that was my way of warning that. Because it was my birthday. We were cutting cake, and celebrating this show that seems like it never ends every Monday night, when the weather radio went off. And luckily Scott and the other meteorologists were, watching the storm. But, that was my first notification. And it always is within seconds, seeing it on National Weather Service chat or Slack now. I will watch Troy's head explode since our office in Birmingham has officially downgraded National Weather Service chat to a backup. We'll talk about that in a minute, maybe. But, that's the fastest way to get that warning, Bruce.
Yeah, WDIV TV up in Detroit did a neat little package once, and they actually went to the National Weather Service and watched them issue a test tornado warning, and then they saw how quickly the NOAA weather radios alerted. It was about 2 seconds after the radar operator pushed tornado warning that the weather radios went off. So those of you who listen, I've got a puppy down here that's chiming in. Those of you who listen, we've got a special for you on the program. If you're a WeatherBrains fan, use the promo code SPAN25 and get 25% off of an order at midlandusa.com. But I just encourage everyone to have a NOAA weather radio in your home. Whatever brand you buy, doesn't matter. Get one.
Bruce, you know the rule. If we hear the pooch, we get to meet the pooch.
Oh. Yeah, let me see here he is. Come here, Finley. There you go.
No.
That's Finley. You know, J.P. Finley was the first tornado researcher.
Oh my goodness, that's fabulous.
He was the Fujita of the 1800s. So this is Finley. That's Finley.
That might be him incarnate. You never know, Bruce. He might have come back in another life.
Love it.
That's outstanding. All right. Well, I guess it is time for picks of the week. I'll start with you, Troy. How about I know you were going to get out here early tonight, but you stayed to the bitter end.
No, I was actually given permission to hang around, so I'm in good shape. I don't know. I think James would probably and Jason will probably come after me now at this point. You may too, Bill, and Lisa may come after me. But I really want this week, as we get into spring weather season, Daryl Hertzman again has come through, as he does in so many times, is at the Iowa Environmental Mesonet. He's a computer programmer extraordinaire, and he has a link which we'll have up on the page where you can get the latest. And Jason knows what these are, and most of us do. The LSRs, the local storm reports, for the last 48 hours. At the top will be the most recent one. It doesn't auto refresh necessarily, but if you'll just load them up, the most recent LSRs anywhere, any WSO in the United States, Guam, Alaska, in the United States, Puerto Rico, they'll come up. And it's really a good source of storm information if you're following storms. And again, thank you, Daryl Hertzman. He does more for our enterprise than a lot of people do. Thank you, Daryl.
Yeah, we really appreciate Daryl and all the things he's done. And you just keep giving me these time wasters, Troy. That's well, that one's actually not as much of a time waster as it is a useful tool right there. But you've certainly given me plenty of those recently. I'll do my pick of the week real quick. It's a suggestion of Harvey Day. It's the 25th annual Ohio State Meteorology Club's Severe Weather Symposium. It's coming up shortly, and it's going to be outstanding as always. That's going to be my pick of the week. How about you, Jason? I hope you've had time to think of something really good for us here as your pick of the week.
Yeah, my pick of the week is SPC's High Resolution Ensemble Forecast page, the HREF. Just a lot of really good information there as we go into severe weather this week with environment parameters, more of the storm scale, rotation parameters, means and probabilities, and it also worked really well for some winter weather events here last month. So
outstanding. That's a great pick. And Jason, we're thankful to have you and the entire team out at the National Weather Service in Birmingham, located at Calera. Thank you for everything you do. Really a cast of all-stars out there, and they're really needed where they are. So thank you for being with us tonight. And Mr. Tim Marshall, what's your pick of the week, sir?
My pick of the week is Crazy Larry's Barbecue in Amarillo, Texas.
That's the best pick of the week right there. What did you have, Tim?
Yeah, well, I've been out there. I've actually met Crazy Larry. He's owned the business there for quite a while, and it's some of the best barbecue I really like there. And I stop by every time I go out there to Crazy Larry's.
Well, next time you're in, ask Crazy Larry if he'd like to be a sponsor of WeatherBrains, because that's an awesome pick. It's always good to see you, Tim. Jen Nairmore, what you got for us pick of the week?
So we got an email today at email@weatherbrains.com from Michael Potts. And I found a pick of the week to save someone from the foghorn. So as soon as I saw it, I'm like, me, because it was interesting. Someone is slowly reverse engineering a Weather Channel WeatherStar 4000. So I started looking at the story, and then I went to this guy's Twitter account. He actually does have it working, and he ended up getting a WeatherStar 4000, and that's
on
the piece
eBay.
of equipment on eBay. And this is the piece of equipment that did the weather on the 8s, but it was the cool one where it was like the words and it was the jazz music, and you're like, oh man, this is great. Everyone waits for the local on the 8s. And I, being an ex-Weather Channel employee, and then I also work with the Star Excel, I was very fascinated with this. So I'm going to reach out to this person and see if I can get them on the show, because I want to find out this whole story. How did you get it? How are you getting it? Let's geek out on how you're getting this to work. And he's in Ohio, because I stalked his Twitter page, and I found out he's in Ohio, and he had it working for Hamilton County a week ago. He had the forecast up there. He had a little snapshot of it. So he has been making it work. It's really cool. Nice. I just think it's a neat thing.
Yeah, what I read was that the software didn't reside on the device. It was a flash RAM, and it had to come down from the satellite somehow. So it will be fascinating before he gets a cease and desist letter from the weather company, I'm sure, before it's all over with.
Exactly.
Lisa, I'm going to ask you for a pick of the week, and we will grant you an honorarium if you can't come up with something. But I bet you got something for us. Oh, and you're muted, Lisa. So the term of 2020, your Zoom is muted.
There you go. My pick of the week right now is ABC 3340, The Way It's Raining in Fultondale.
Oh boy, there you go. Well, we're
get my full attention.
So have you been a James Spann fan for very long, Lisa?
I have. I hear them say all the time, James Spann is the man. It was like, it doesn't get real until he comes on.
There you go. That's exactly right. Well, we're really thankful for you and what you and your heroic team did here that night, save lives in that tornado. Thank you. And hopefully we won't ever need to talk to you again, but you're welcome to come back anytime.
I really enjoyed it.
Thank you for sticking around for 2 hours too.
Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. And we'll see you at the Cahaba meetings sometime in Birmingham. And Bruce Jones, you always have a great pick of the week.
Well, I've actually shown this before. St. Louis had a bad tornado in 1896, and the American Society of Civil Engineers published this book, Wind Pressures in the St. Louis Tornado, with special reference to the necessity of wind bracing for high buildings. And basically what the book said is, in 1896, gee, if we built our buildings better, they'd perform better during tornadoes.
And 120 years later, we're still doing it, Tim.
Yeah. God.
That was a very appropriate pick of the week, Bruce Jones. Nate, what you got for us, sir? And I guess you got to do Kim too.
Yeah, I'm going to cover Kim's pick first. A lot of talk about message consistency in our enterprise, and do we need it? And if we do, what does it look like? Dr. Castle Williams and Dr. Gina Esco have published an article in, I believe this is the Bulletin of the American Meteorological Society this month, taking a look at message consistency. Spoiler alert, it ain't nearly as easy as it sounds. So this is a good read, and you should check that out. And then my pick of the week is a little less heady. It is a music video produced by a trio of scientists in northern, like Norway, Finland, somewhere in Europe. But they basically turned their PhD, this one guy's PhD dissertation, into a nerdcore rap video. And it's 3 minutes of your life that you got to check it out. And see if you can follow it. And it is atmospheric science. It's not just some random thing. It actually is sort of weather related. So check it out. You won't be disappointed.
I bet a few science teachers will be using that in their classrooms very, very soon. Well, Troy Kimmel, I would entertain a motion that we adjourn.
I say we adjourn. All in favor?
All in favor, say aye. Well, this is WeatherBrains, the weekly netcast. It's all about weather. We thank Midland and Tim Vasquez and the AMS Weather Band for their support of the show. I'm excited to be a member of the Weather Band, and got my newsletter today. If you haven't joined yet, please do that. It's some outstanding information and a lot of fun. We generally record on Monday nights at 8 o'clock Central. It's the labor of love that we've been doing for 16 years now. And we'll be back next Monday night. I forget who the guest is. Who knows who the guest is next Monday night? You would think I would have that committed to memory. Oh, that's going to be a real fun show. It's David Gilhausen. He's a meteorologist who, has a really neat outreach program with a tornado model. And our guest panelist will be Dr. Marty Bell from Tempest, because some of us have had Tempest weather stations and enjoyed them a lot. I think it keeps all the burglars out of my yard, because I think they think it's a surveillance camera. So I shouldn't have probably said that. But anyway, that will be our guest next week. We've got a lot of exciting shows coming up here over the next several weeks for sure. And if you're new to the show, you can access it in a variety of different ways. iTunes, of course, Stitcher, all the different platforms that people get their podcasts from. And you can also see it on YouTube, Big Brains Media, or AlabamaWX.com. And of course, on the site, WeatherBrains.com, where you'll find all our social media accounts. If you have a guest suggestion or a comment or a complaint, send them to email@weatherbrains.com. Those are routed directly to Troy when they're complaints, and he takes care of them promptly. But till next week, for the panel, this is Guest Booking Officer Bill Murray reminding you to keep an eye to the sky, because you'll always have something fun to look at. Thanks to our rock stars for being with us tonight, Jason, Tim, Lisa.
Lisa, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So it was a lot of fun having you,
Lisa.
Tim, good to see you, man.
Same here, Troy.
Good to see you, Troy.
Yeah, good to see you, Troy.
Yeah, I'm gonna. You'll notice that I'm drinking tonight, so you know.
Ain't nothing wrong with that.
I deserve it. I deserve it. So, hey, see y'all later.
Bye, everybody.
Take care.
Well. Sorry about that. Had to kind of bail out early. We had a severe thunderstorm warning issued for one of our counties, for Etowah County, which is the city of Gadsden, because of large hail. So I had to go do some television, but that was a fun show. Always great having the gang on, like Tim Marshall, one of the greatest engineer meteorologists in the world. Very smart guy, and fun episode tonight. But I got to go because the weather's active. So thank you all for watching. Have a marvelous